I am Devin J. Hall. I officially became a certified cannabis healer and coach educator. I get to be a part of a lifetime of men and women who have fought really hard for this medicine. And I think the reason that they fought so hard is because it brings so much to the world and it absolutely changes lives. It inspires people, it lifts people up, it gets rid of anxiety, it recalculates the fear factor in the brain. And I know this because I've been dealing with at least 30 years worth of trauma. For a lot of years, people told me that I should use cannabis, but I really wasn't ready for the doors that cannabis would open. And it forced me to look at all of my trauma, which was horrible. But because of that, I was able to start loudmouthbrowngirl.com, where I started discussing my use of cannabis. And now I have a network of women across the world who come from different races, creeds, nationalities, orientations, who use cannabis, who teach about cannabis, and who share the joy in being CannAzores.
I am Nicole Hines. I'm a cannabis chef and educator, and I founded a company called Faded Living to normalize adult cannabis use. So a huge portion of my business is education, and I write cannabis recipes. I also teach people how to cook with cannabis. I also help people select cultivars that are low in THC to start with. And I give people options of what's out there on the market so that it's not so overwhelming. Basically educate people in an easy way. Cooking with cannabis can be extremely safe and easy to do as long as you have all the information.
My name is Kadisha Thornhill. I'm also known as Miss Reed Wiki, and I'm one half of the co-founding duo of the Afro-Canada Bud Sisters. We didn't see any representation of us following the legalization of cannabis federally, and we didn't see anything trying to educate us. Creating the Afro-Canada Bud Sisters was a means of filling that hole, because there is a gap of education, whether you're brand new to cannabis or whether you've been using it for the past 20 years. While legalization happening in October of 2018 was a great thing for all of us, it didn't magically make cannabis more accessible for us in terms of education and information. Creating that group allowed us to learn together and for us to exchange knowledge. Bringing that kind of knowledge to our members, which right now we're just under 800 members, is a responsibility I take personally. When I became a medical cannabis patient myself, mostly for chronic pain symptoms, but also with anxiety and depression, there were gaps in how much flow of information regarding medical cannabis would come to me as a patient. I undertook to learn more about it. I helped produce and facilitated a town hall entirely on the topic of the necessity for BIPOC inclusion in the Canadian cannabis space. And I'm developing a cannabis literacy program that I'd be looking to do at different post-secondary campuses across the nation. Being part of one of the biggest demographics that were persecuted for cannabis use during the 100-year prohibition on cannabis. I can't ignore the fact that a lot of people in my community do not know or have a negative perception of the stigmas associated with cannabis because of relatives they've known who've been persecuted, have lost their entire futures or careers because of cannabis, being caught with cannabis through law enforcement. So I want to rehabilitate the image of the plant to my community, connect them with medical resources so they can learn more about the plant. It's a really wonderful plant that can benefit all of us.
Hi, my name is Michelle Parada, and I am the founder of Mimi Cannabis. I've been a cannabis user for over 45 years, and I wanted to make sure that people 50 and older had a voice once legalization came through. We need to go back to the basics and make sure that people my age and older are comfortable with the product, if they need to see a doctor, they have that access. If they need to get their hands on medical cannabis, that it's much more accessible for them. Most people 50 and older are taking between 4 and 6 regular prescription drugs. There are some people that do still need regular pharmaceuticals, but I do believe that there is a place for people my age and older to replace some of those medications and make their lives a lot more easier, make the reactions to the pharmaceuticals much less. Working with an educator to me is crucial. We need to take the time. Although I have used cannabis for a number of years, learning to use it medically was a totally different thing. And to be honest with you, it's been the greatest thing I've ever done for myself. I think that there's a lot of education that needs to go out in regards to you don't have to get high, you just have to get well.
Hi there, my name is Therese Bowers and I'm in British Columbia, Canada. So I'm very lucky to be here and to be able to pick up on all the cannabis culture in my area. Primarily, I came to cannabis for insomnia, anxiety, and pain. And but I didn't know really how to use it for those things. I didn't know how to properly dose or what kinds of strains to look for or what CBD was. And it wasn't until I actually started training to be a cannabis coach that I realized, wait, I'm missing a whole another section of working with cannabis. And a lot of the stigmas had come up and was being like, well, I don't want to be high during the day. And I don't want to have other people seeing me taking cannabis. So that really impacted my ability to use to use it in a really healthy way and to have cannabis impacting more areas of my life. It really was when I started educating myself and started my own training with cannabis coaching that I realized how much I didn't know and how much the stigma was holding me back and how much everybody is so different now as I'm working with clients and meeting people who are curious about cannabis. They often will have an experience about cannabis. Well, I tried it 2-3 years ago, or I tried it in my earlier years. It didn't work for me the one time I tried it, so I'm not doing it anymore. Well, there's much more to the story, and it's not a one and done thing. It's a series of experimentings and a process of working it through within our bodies and getting to know how cannabis works within our own unique bodies. And part of the piece that we're really missing is educating people on that and sharing that just because the first experience you had with cannabis didn't work doesn't mean that it's not right for you. And continuing to work through with an educator or with a coach, somebody who can help to just guide and educate and share how cannabis can be impactful, and also really sharing about how we've been impacted by society in a really negative way with smoking and with potheads and with the whole stereotype of a stoner. And using cannabis in a medical way isn't about that. It's a totally different perspective. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different healthy regime that we're incorporating, these tools that we're incorporating into our well-being. And we're not seeing that yet widely in the media, use of cannabis for wellness, where we can live our lives and we can be parents and we can go to work and we can be active members in society. And cannabis is there supporting us as opposed to taking away our life and our vitality. Being able to just share that with people in a way that is safe and comfortable and not shaming. We want to really take the shame and the blame away from this. And we want to bring people into a healthy lifestyle and a healthy situation working with cannabis.
I'm Donna Johansson. I primarily work in public service with government and nonprofit agencies. In 2014, I set out to work in the cannabis industry as a cannabis education consultant. Cannabis education was not something offered through our government nor educational institutions. In fact, there was rampant misinformation and stigma at that time. And my services to clients included advisory and expertise in cannabis education programming. I created a series of community seminars and information sessions that included expert speakers and presented the medical science, facts, and truth about cannabis. We also invited cannabis patients to share their story and journey, and people were grateful to receive the invaluable information and resources. Our seminar was titled Cannabis is Medicine. In 2018, I established the Canadian Women in Cannabis organization, providing a safe channel for women in cannabis to connect share, amplify, and empower. Quick Collective has over 400 members and is growing from across Canada and worldwide. We have created our 4 pillars of advocacy based on the values we uphold as a community of passionate people in cannabis that are helping to create awareness and bring together the education of cannabis in Canada.
My name is Cristina Montoya. I'm a registered dietitian in Canada, but I'm also a dietitian from Colombia. I wanted to find alternatives to opiates to relieve my pain. And I was afraid to get into the world of cannabis because of the stigma that it had in Colombia and the violence and the drug cartels. I did not really want to even talk about cannabis. But that changed about 5 years ago when the fibromyalgia pain and the pain from rheumatoid arthritis could not be relieved by conventional medicine. I said, well, I have to give this plant a chance. It was my last resource, unfortunately. I took interest in taking a course in the US called Holistic Cannabis Practitioner, to listen to many lectures by Dr. Ethan Russo, Raphael Michelin. I said, oh, well, this gotta be a thing, right? Like, why will that physician and neuroscientist and chemist will be talking about cannabis? So that grabbed my attention. And I think it started to make sense to me. As I started feeling less pain even in my own experience, I was able to reduce and eliminate prescription medications. And that was just a motivator to keep learning about cannabis as medicine. I like to have a good night's sleep and feel rested the next day. That's the reason why I use cannabis. And the way I do it with my clients is using like anti-inflammatory nutrition and very gentle lifestyle strategies that they can use. And I honestly see cannabis as a supplement, as a tool, part of my toolkit to show them how they can utilize or integrate and your anti-inflammatory nutrition, lifestyle, and cannabis. So we have the value of working as a team. It's just not that I'm encouraging my patients to just use cannabis and get rid of the prescription. No, I want them to understand an integrative approach to healing and find that healing from within. As a patient myself, I don't expect you to have all the answers, but what I do expect from the physicians is that to recognize that there are other allied health professionals or educators that can help your patients to reach their goals.
My name is Andrea Maharg, and I am a certified cannabis coach and educator, and I have a small business named Reveal Cannabis. And at Reveal Cannabis, my goal is to teach new consumers to cannabis how they can use this plant to live a happier, healthier life. I also teach all the cannabis science curriculum at the Cannabis Coaching Institute, where we're training other coaches and educators to go out and do this work. Education is a huge passion of mine. I've been an elementary school teacher for almost 20 years, and I think it is incredibly important for people to consider how people are being educated and why they're being educated in the cannabis world. The scariest thought that I have is that somebody will hear that cannabis helps for sleep or anxiety or depression or pain, and they will try it once without having any previous experience with it or without talking to anybody. And they'll either have a bad side effect because they've taken too much, or they won't get any relief because they haven't taken the right product or they haven't taken enough. And then they decide for themselves, like, cannabis doesn't work for me. And I think with even just the smallest pieces of education, like cannabis affects everybody differently, the dose really matters. There's different types of cannabis that can make you feel different ways. I think even with those really small like nuggets of information that we can provide, then people are going to be able to make much better, more informed choices about their health and actually be able to use the cannabis plant to feel better.
Well, my name is Sjoerd Visser. I'm from God's Green Earth Consulting. Somebody who's a bit of a plant nerd, if you will, and horticulturalist. I have training. I went to school for horticulture. I've heard a lot of people talk about growing plants, the non-scientific views of production, but there's a lot of problems that the average person, I guess, would have, where if we follow the understanding that's already in place in commercial greenhouse or agriculture and things like that, we can follow those same steps in growing cannabis quite easily. And especially if you're going to go from small to a larger scale, a lot of efficiency and things like that. I will say the number one problem of anything will be the soil, and then the next step will be watering. But in terms of growing cannabis, I don't think it's ultimately super difficult, but it does relate to, say, growing tomatoes. If you can't really grow tomatoes at home to eat, you will have a hard time getting to the finished flowering part, simply because it is a long-term plant. This isn't something like a lettuce that grows in 6 to 8 weeks. It is something at minimum, even from clone, you're going to need 2 to 3 months, potentially up to 5 months to finish a plant from start. So that's a long-term project. Like a tomato, you're trying to keep a vine alive for many months to produce the end result. So a little bit of knowledge goes a long way, actually, just to be able to observe what's happening, to be able to see the steps along the way, especially on a medicinal aspect. If you are hoping to produce, let's just equate it to food. If you're hoping to make the best out of what you can and the healthiest option, and especially if you're somebody immunocompromised or something like that, you may want to learn more about the soil growing agriculture, as opposed to if you're simply in the business and you just need to make the yields because that pays the property, then maybe chemicals and some of the fertilizer options may be the way to go still, where you're growing in full hydroponics as opposed to full soil grown. As genetics will be bred in the future, kind of for various results and things. But in general, we already know how to get the most tomatoes per square foot in the greenhouse in that sense. And those are all going to come back to your medium and then how you control the plant. And typically those are all done by the same.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Massey. I'm a certified cannabis educator and patient care coach, and I'm a yoga and meditation teacher. I'm also a young breast cancer survivor and the daughter of a breast cancer survivor. I came to medical cannabis myself as a patient first, and it took me a long time to get it working optimally for me. I also noticed that people around me were asking questions. They were curious. They wanted to know how it was working for me. And these people included my own medical oncologist, my naturopathic doctors, my naturopathic oncologist. And these people all encouraged me to take some courses and to start helping patients. So I work in a naturopathic clinic, and I work alongside naturopathic doctors because in Canada, they're not allowed to speak to the medical benefits of cannabis. It's still very taboo from their college. However, what we know is that many patients of naturopathic doctors are consuming cannabis, whether for recreational purposes or for medical purposes. And so I'm there to help bridge that gap, to create a place where patients can have a conversation, can ask questions, can get thoroughly educated on what it's like to be a medical cannabis patient in Canada. We know that sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get to your optimal therapeutic dose and to get some of your difficult conditions treated well. It does take some time, it takes some practice, and it takes a lot of noticing how it works in your body. I teach nervous system regulation. And because we know the connection between the ECS and the nervous system, we find that when we add meditation or restorative yoga practices and we pair it with cannabis as a medicine, that we have quite a bit more depth to the healing, to the practice, to the ability to find calm and peace and reduce anxiety, improve our sleep, and just find that place of homeostasis.
My name is Kelly Becker. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Cannabis Education Guild. We're a platform that offers commercial cannabis education to the industry or anyone looking to work in the industry. Not only do we focus on elements of the supply chain, we're also very focused on educating about the social impact standards that this industry needs to have to operate ethically, both in Canada and on a global level. I've spent the past 6.5 years educating people from patients to doctors to members of government about the benefits of medical cannabis and this industry. There are so many things that matter when it comes to prescribing cannabis and to taking it seriously as a medicine. Canada has not yet classified cannabis as a medicine, which is problematic. We also do not teach people in med school about the endocannabinoid system. And this is where we're seeing a lot of problems where medical professionals are not taking it seriously. So there's this big disconnect. And with legalization allowing for retail stores to be accessible to all, we're seeing patients self-medicating. There's no monitoring, there's no dosing structure. So by having a standard in education and prescribing and dosing, it will only benefit the patients and the people of Portugal. I also believe there are many things that Portugal can learn from Canada, such as not taxing the medicine. Taxing it has made it incredibly difficult to access for patients who need large quantities of CBD oil, which could be, a bill of up to $2,000 a month for a child with epilepsy. Also having a more integrated approach, having the medical professionals included at the forefront of discussion of legislation, and even in recreational legalization if that's coming down the road. There's also a lot to be considered with genetics and choosing genetics that are more disease-specific, condition-specific. There's been many R&D roadblocks, which hopefully Portugal can avoid. A little bit about CEG, the Cannabis Education Guild. As I mentioned, we're focused on the commercial side of education, but we've also done a lot of education in the medical space, mostly in Asia, in emerging markets like Korea, Thailand, India, the Philippines, and Malaysia. And it's very exciting to see how medical professionals for all different types of specialists or natural medicine professionals coming together around this plant and just wanting a natural alternative for their patients. We've been able to bring together a group of experts who have helped us with this education in both the medical and commercial spaces. But more excitingly, we've been able to bring together a group of international advisors who are lawyers and working on cannabis files in different governments around the world, as well as human rights lawyers, because there's a very urgent moment in time where the cannabis global supply chain is being assembled today. And we have the opportunity to embed a new policy that protects labor protection in this industry, especially when it comes to farmers, migrant workers, everyone that's going to be working in factories in the manufacturing process of cannabis are going to be affected by labor relations. It doesn't seem to be a conversation that's happening today. So the CEG is working with these advisors to have Canada maybe be the first country to try a sector-based approach to regulating all forms of modern slavery in the Cannabis Act in Canada, which would affect not only domestic workers, but as well the workers that would be providing products that Canada would eventually import. So we hope Canada can take the world stage with a position of leadership in this type of social policy for a slavery-free cannabis industry, and we hope that Portugal will follow suit.
Hi, I'm Alex Revich. I've been working in the medical cannabis industry since 2013, originally with a company called MedRelief. And over there, I exhibited at about 70 different medical conferences, educating doctors, nurses, and pharmacists all about medical cannabis. Back in 2013, it was quite difficult because no one really heard anything about it. Mostly over 90% of all the research being done was to talk about how bad cannabis was and dangerous. So it was pretty difficult at the beginning, but we partnered with a company out of Israel, and we actually brought the first CBD genetics to Canada, and we were the first growing CBD in North America legally. And people didn't even know what that was. Like THC was just vilified really badly at that point, you know, the devil's lettuce and all that stuff. So what we did is we started to learn some of the positives about it, and we brought the CBD in, and we started to talk to doctors about the minimal amount of research that was done, just showing them, give it a chance, it's not dangerous, showing them that you don't have to smoke it, which was really important because doctors didn't want to hear about a medicine that people had to smoke. We wanted people to open up their minds and to give it another chance, that don't look at cannabis as this drug that people just get high at concerts with, but that can actually change some of their medications. You know, we never talked about being a first line of medication. We always talked about it. If you try something else and it didn't work, try cannabis. Or we would say things like, we want to treat your symptoms. We're not talking about curing anything. And that really resonated with the doctors. And the military veteran program, something I'm very proud of, where we helped thousands of veterans that were having a very difficult time dealing with their PTSD and taking many bad psychoactive medications. And we found a way to use cannabis, but not by smoking it. We found other ways for them to be able to use it. And that was really, really important. So from MedRelief, create an education program called Cannabis IQ, which was taken by thousands of nurses and doctors and pharmacists across Canada. And this is an important lesson that I want emerging markets to understand. Education needs to come from a neutral perspective. When I was doing education from a licensed producer, I was looked upon as a pharma rep, and I was just pushing this on them because I make money on cannabis. So I realized I had to leave the business in order to do education from a neutral perspective. And that's when I started to go to hospitals and veteran legion halls and places that would never let me come and speak before when I was working at the cannabis company. So I ended up leaving there to start a company called Flower, which was the first company in Canada to only sell through pharmacies. We decided we didn't want to sell directly to patients. This way the system works in Canada is we only sell to one place, and it just doesn't make sense that way. And we may partner with the largest pharmacy chain here in Canada, called Shoppers Drug Mart, and we expanded all across Canada. And that worked out much, much better than when we were selling directly and people were forced to only buy our product. Like, people aren't forced to one pharmaceutical company. Why would they be forced with cannabis? So very proud of that. And then when I left Flower to focus, they weren't doing as much on the medical side, I started with a company, Hybrid Farm. We're the first pharmacy in North America that's able for patients to walk out with medical cannabis, which is the right way to be doing things. It must go through pharmacy because the doctors are very busy. They're dealing with everything, every type of medicine, every type of condition. It's not realistic for them to be specialists in a one type of medicine. So what we want to do is we want to educate these pharmacists to be able to talk about cannabis like they talk about other drugs, and know how cannabis works with other medications they're on. And that's kind of the secret. It took us a long time to realize that in Canada, but we know now that going through a pharmacy works better. The doctors can hand off that level of care to a pharmacist, which they're used to doing anyways, versus what we used to do where the doctor would send it directly to a licensed producer, which is a drug manufacturer, and then hope that the drug manufacturer can guide the patient on what's best for the patient and not what's best for the business. You know, and that's also the challenge as an emerging market happens. Money is important for the business to succeed, but sometimes is the reason why businesses fail. And important that people do have that heart and that passion for the plant and for the knowledge, but you do also need the right strategy and the right people to help you. And you do need the knowledge of what the right things are to do and having people with experience around, or else many businesses fail. We saw that here in Canada, and it's unfortunate. Some of the nicest people with the best cannabis ended up failing, and then some people succeeded that didn't necessarily have the best passion for the plant, but they had the right business sense. And it's really important to balance the two. And that's a lesson whenever I was actually speaking in Berlin for many years, and was really expressing the importance of setting up the right foundation for the business. And then the cannabis. Cannabis is really important, but if you don't have the right business strategy and the right plan put in place, it doesn't matter how good your cannabis is, because you won't have enough money to even get to the market. So the last thing I would say for Portugal is do something good for your people. and create a good market to help your patients and to help your people create businesses on this, and then look at international and export. I find that a lot of these international markets that I speak to are so excited about exporting it to different countries that they often forget that about their own people. And you want to create an industry and then make that industry something people are proud of and then others want to purchase from. And that's where I think Portugal has a chance. We have a company in Portugal called Hologen that is doing some work out there. And we've seen Portugal as a great opportunity right from the beginning. I think Portugal has a lot of benefits to other countries in Europe for a cannabis market, but I really want to see them create a good market for the Portuguese people. And then I want to see it becoming a hub for cannabis for all of Europe. So really excited to see what comes out of there, and hope to come out there one day soon.
Hi, my name is Shauna Dunbar. I am a co-chair and executive director of EducaNation, and I'm a certified cannabis educator in clinical practice, a cannabis patient, and a caregiver. My journey as a cannabis educator began with my epileptic son 9 years ago, when I started researching alternative treatments for his epilepsy. Since we were never able to gain full control of his epilepsy, and because he was suffering from side effects with the pharmaceutical treatment, we were really eager to find something natural and effective. After 2 years of researching cannabis and a countrywide shortage of his pharmaceutical prescription, we began our journey with his cannabis treatment that has since led him to being seizure-free for over 6 years. Amazing, right? Actually miraculous for us. But it wasn't easy. My son and I were alone. We had no guidance from a healthcare provider to tell us what products to use, how they should be consumed, or how much of it he should be taking. I kind of had to take his life into my own hands and trust my own interpretations of the information I'd found online. It took 1.5 years before we were even able to obtain a legal prescription, and so I also had to risk the authorities coming and taking him away from me because I was giving him an illicit substance. But our story and word of our success quickly traveled around the community, and I soon found myself inundated with calls from people wanting advice on how to use cannabis to treat their own medical conditions. After living what I did with my son, I decided that no one should have to go through that alone. So I decided to continue my education and become a certified educator, which led 2 family medicine practitioners in my community to ask me to work with their patients. In Canada, the majority of healthcare providers that prescribe cannabis work in cannabis clinics, and so they do not diagnose or follow their patients outside of prescribing them cannabis. I'm privileged to be able to work within a family medicine practice where the doctors know their patients well and follow them regularly. And it's that follow-up care that I see as being the key to success. Our endocannabinoid systems are as different as our fingerprints or our personalities. Finding the right product, method of intake, and dosage takes time, effort, and perseverance. Managing that alone is daunting to say the least, but having regular follow-up care and guidance from a cannabis educator can help make that journey more comfortable and less overwhelming. I follow each one of my patients for a 3-month period, and I walk them through every step, from obtaining a prescription to choosing products to dose titration to managing unwanted side effects. Over the last 4 years, I have established working relationships with several healthcare providers and have worked with over 300 patients, helping over 75% of them find success with their cannabis treatment. And I encourage anyone who is considering embarking on a cannabis health journey, whether as a patient or a prescribing practitioner, to use this model of patient education and follow-up care, because I promise it will help improve your chances of finding success.